I'm always up for a challenge, so here's the most interesting whiskeys from the hutch. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Hutch. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey through the world of whiskey. So recently a really fun challenge has been circulating throughout the WhiskeyTube community to name the most interesting whiskeys in your collection. I believe it started with Kurt over at SLB Drinks. Great channel. I'm sure you guys have heard of them and been watching them. They're huge and they're awesome. And then it made its way to me through Josh over at Your Drinking Buddy. If you haven't checked out his channel and his video, super interesting. He's got a ton of interesting stuff. And also Brian and Jordan from the Bourbon Pour. They just started up their channel, so please go over there and support them. Give them a like and watch their video as well because they're awesome guys. They actually invited me down to their bourbon event in Seymour, Indiana, and it was a blast. Super fun time. Okay, so before I dive into my list, I gotta challenge some people and keep this thing rolling. So I'm gonna challenge Matt over at Whiskey Wisdom. He recently had me on for a live stream and it was a ton of fun. So Matt, you're challenged. And then I'm gonna challenge David over at the Whiskey Bank. He's been commenting on my videos and I like his content a lot. So going back and forth is a lot of fun and I wanna see what his list includes. All right, I think that covers pretty much everything I need to cover. Now let's get into the list, the most interesting whiskeys in my collection. So we'll start with one that I've really had this interesting dynamic relationship with throughout my whiskey journey so far, and that is Maker's Mark FAE 01. So the FAE 02 was a bottle that I got early in my whiskey hunting journey, one of the first limited bottles I got, and I fell in love. I later traded for a bottle of FAE 01 with a different bottle, and it was just kind of an interesting relationship. I didn't know if I liked it at first. Certainly didn't think I liked it as much as the FAE 02, but every time I come back to it, I like it more and more. There's more tobacco and spice on this one in a way, and it is fascinating to me how my relationship with it has changed. I know when Kurt first did his video, he talked a lot about how a whiskey is really interesting if you can just sit with it for an hour and let it kind of reveal itself to you, and I think FAE 01 fits that to a T for me. So that's my first on the list. Second bottle is one that the whole series I found really interesting. This bottle in particular is just so good, but each of these releases is fascinating, and that is Chattanooga whiskey bottled in bond. This is the fall 2018 release, and it is so full of so many rich different flavors. The depth to this is awesome, and then the balance to it is exceptional, and that's kind of impressive given that they blend so many different things into these kind of crazy experimental bottled in bond releases. So this is like 4 different mash bills all blended together. They're often throwing in stuff that's like malted chocolate rye or special kinds of wheat strains, and they do a lot with the grains and they experiment a lot, and they're so fascinating. So if you haven't checked out Chattanooga and you're looking for a more special release from them, keep your eye out for the bottled in bond. It's usually around like $50 and really good. All right, third bottle on my list is a blended whiskey from one of the best blenders out there, and this one just has so much in it, and that is Barrel Bourbon New Year. This is the 2024 release. Man, this stuff is complex, rich, so smooth, and full of different notes. Like this is again one you could spend forever kind of diving into citrus notes, richer cherry and dark fruit notes, and then plenty of brown sugar too. And that's because so much goes into this. I mean, it's got a Kentucky 8-year-old, Wyoming 11-year-old, New York 5-year-old, Tennessee 8 and 15-year-old, Indiana 5, 6, and 9-year-old, Texas 5-year-old, Ohio 5-year-old, Maryland 5 and 6-year-old. So a lot of different components, adds to a lot of complexity, and makes this one just so interesting to sip on. Okay, so fourth on my list is actually what I have poured up here, and it's just a really fascinating finished whiskey, and that is Starlight. This is a rye finished in apple brandy barrels. Man, When I tasted this at the distillery and went to Starlight, it just kind of shocked me. It really smells and tastes like apple cider combined with rye whiskey. It is super apple forward, such a bouquet of that. But then when you sip it on the palate, it brings in those layers of like darker brown sugar and oak, which is nice. So I'm just gonna taste it here real fast for you. Cheers. Yeah, so interesting. Rye spice, good caramel, brown sugar, little touch of oak. But then again, it's got that apple cider sour tartness to it. Really interesting finish. Starlight does a ton of very interesting finishes. They do a lot of different things. They have access to a lot of different kinds of barrels and fruits, and man, they go all over the place, and it's just so fun to get to explore. All right, while we're at it, why don't we stay in the rye world and the craft world and go to something that's just fascinating, the kinds of flavor directions it goes in, and that is Redwood Empire's Rocket Top Rye. This is batch 2. For me, this is like cotton candy. So candy forward, so nice and bright, like very bright. But then it still kind of holds on with some spice and darker layers. But man, what stands out to me most is this bubblegum cotton candy, fresh, like cherry lollipop note that comes through strong on this one, and it is just fascinating, and I really enjoy it. Next bottle is one that comes from, again, another craft distillery. I think that's another way to get into some really nice, interesting whiskeys, is to go craft. This one really impressed me when it came out, and it's very special, and that is New Riff's Bohemian Wheat Bourbon. So New Riff is only about 20 minutes from me, so it's a really nice distillery to have nearby because I do enjoy a lot of their products. This was a much more special release that I was able to get from the distillery, and it is 8 years old, so one of their oldest products ever, and it's 117.9 proof, so really nice barrel strength option here. Bohemian wheat, it's really fascinating what that brings to it. I don't think I had ever had a wheated product from New Riff before, and this has like this bready quality to it that is fantastic. There's a good amount of that wheat presence to it, but then man, it's got raspberry and dark chocolate as well. It is a fascinating pour and one that I've really enjoyed. It made it pretty decently far in my Whiskey of the Year bracket last year, and for good reason. It's quite phenomenal. All right, we did a total of 7, so we've got 1 bottle left. My final bottle on this list is the most recent one that I've been able to pick up. And man, as soon as I tasted it, it was fascinating, and it's good timing that this challenge is going around because this is an interesting whiskey. And that is Shank's 2023 release. So this is a more limited release from Michter's Distillery, and it is their Sour Mash limited release. Don't know exactly what the mash bill is here. They don't disclose that, but thought to be kind of a more balanced blend between bourbon and rye in the mash bill. The proof on this bad boy is 191.2 proof, so it's pretty low proof, but man, that blend of bourbon and rye, that sour mash kind of experience, really interesting. They even put malted rye in the mash bill here, so again, we don't know how much that is, but this one is so fascinating. It's kind of goes all over the place. I can see how some people might not like it because it kind of ping-pongs between those bourbon and rye notes, but I kind of enjoy it a lot. It's got this lemongrass, interesting note from the rye side, and a little bit of like a bubblegum maybe even, but then on the bourbon side it brings spice and warming kind of cinnamon and some richer flavors as well. But it is by far one of the more interesting things I've ever tasted. All right, everybody, I think that's gonna do it. I think that is the 7 most interesting whiskeys, at least right now, in my collection from the Hutch. Each of these has fascinated me. My relationship with it has either changed over time. As soon as I tasted it, I knew it was unique and different. Good amount of craft on here, kind of representing some more varying directions you can go in the whiskey world. So Hopefully this has been fun and informative. Thanks again to Josh and to Brian and Jordan for challenging me. Hopefully Matt and David will get around to making their videos soon and we can see their lists as well. Let me know what you think in the comments below. What did you think of my list? But more importantly, I'm just curious to know what will go on your list. What are the most interesting whiskeys you've been able to taste in your journey so far? All right, that's going to do it, everybody. Till I see you guys again for another video, all I can say is keep drinking good whiskey, try some interesting ones, and cheers.